With Louisiana's corn and soybean crops being harvested statewide, many growers want to know what kind of prices they'll be receiving at their local grain elevators and how that will affect consumer prices. For some insight into those questions, This Week in Louisiana Agriculture's Neil Melancon is standing by with this week's special guest. Neil?
Thanks, Mike. Of course, it's harvest time, and with the burgeoning crop coming in, the question naturally arises what kind of prices we're going to see for these crops. To answer that question, joining me now is Dr. Kurt Guidry with the LSU Ag Center, an ag economist there. And Kurt, I guess the first question is, with corn largely in the bins right now, how much have we seen in Louisiana here, and what are the differences regionally across the state? And I understand it's not the same for every farmer.
No, we really had a pretty difficult growing season for corn this year, particularly earlier in the year when we had a really prolonged period of drought conditions. We're seeing yields across the state that really are ranging from as low as 70 and 80 bushels an acre on dryland corn, as high as 120 to 130 on dryland, and then irrigated corn obviously is a lot better. We're hearing yields in the neighborhood of 160 to 170 on irrigated corn. I think when it's all said and done, dryland corn is probably going to be somewhere around 100 to 110 bushel average, and you're looking at irrigated corn, that's probably going to be somewhere in the 150 to 160 range. So really, particularly on dryland corn, a really significant reduction in yields, what we've experienced over the past several years.
Now, of course, one of the big crops, soybeans, there's a big difference there, especially between the early Group 4 and Group 5 soybeans and the soybeans that are planted later. Tell me a little bit about the difference there, and because, of course, soybeans, the later ones, are still coming in.
Right. The early planted soybeans, again, like with corn, really suffered fairly significantly from the dry conditions that we had. You know, we got rains in the latter part of June and the beginning part of July and for most of July, but for the early planted soybeans, really those were a little bit of a situation of too little, too late. So we're seeing some relatively low soybean yields on those early Group 4 soybeans. We're hearing yields in the range of 20 to 30 bushels, where typically we'd be looking at yields in the neighborhood of 40 bushels on those acreages. The later planted soybeans, those July rains probably did help in terms of boosting their yield capability or yield capacity. So we're seeing some on the later harvested soybeans yields up in the 40 bushel range, and then we still have a pretty good portion of those soybeans that you have to be harvested. The later harvested soybeans, later developing soybeans, while the rains did go a long way in helping, we do have Asian soybean rust in the state, probably earlier than we had at any time in the years since it's been here. So that becomes more of a factor or more of a concern for those producers as they try to get to the end of their growing season for those later soybeans.
And one final question, very quickly. When consumers hear about prices, they think about their pocketbook in the grocery store, but it's fairly decoupled from the prices of grain versus what you see at the grocery store.
Yeah, when you look at the commodity prices as a percentage of a consumer product price, those tend to be a very small percentage. So, you know, the amount of rice that we have in a consumer product is going to be a very small percentage. So that's one factor. Because of the small percentage, the impact of commodity prices on consumer product prices is going to be relatively small. The other fact is that they buy these inventories several months in advance. So when we look at prices today, even though commodity prices have come down, why have consumer prices not come down? They're still looking at an inventory that they paid at a much higher commodity prices. So there is a lag in terms of lower commodity prices and when do we see it in the grocery store.
All right, thank you very much. Dr. Kurt Guidry, an ag economist at the Louisiana State University Ag Center.